All right, welcome back to the Business Growth Playbook. I'm your host, Jeff Evans, joined today by my co-host, Dean Malley. How are we doing, Dean?
Hey, we're doing great.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Well, we're thrilled today to welcome Michael Matalone to our show. Mike's the founder of XP3 Talent and author of the Amazon bestseller, Hire, Train, Retain. Now it's in its second edition. Here's the book. We'll be talking about that for sure today. For nearly 20 years, Mike has dedicated himself to helping construction companies reimagine their potential and their people. His scientifically validated XP3 Talent system has helped businesses across the country supercharge their ability to hire, train, and retain top talent with guaranteed, measurable results in just 90 days. With companies like Outback Deck, Contract Exteriors, and Gerry's Roofing and Siding, crediting Michael's methodology for their growth and success, we're excited to dive into how his approach transforms organizations and delivers measurable improvements in hiring, productivity, and retention. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Awesome. Well, that was a long introduction, but something that you certainly needed to have. And, thank you for flying all the way here just for our little show. We appreciate it.
Again, thank you guys.
And Dean, you know Michael from other areas here.
I do. I'm hoping he's showing up with a check today, but no, it's funny. If you go back to February a year ago, Michael was one of my first customers, and I'm blessed, one, that he wanted to come down and join us today, but two, that he's still a customer 14 months later. So it makes today very special for me. So definitely appreciate you taking the time and the expense to come down to ATL land.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dean.
All right, so Mike, we're going to get into it. All right, so your company states that XP3 is on a mission to accelerate your clients' ability to build high-performing teams that drive organizational success.
Correct.
What personal experiences kind of led you to dedicate your career to solving these talent challenges?
Good question. So back in 2002, I became a Vistage Chair. So if you guys aren't familiar with Vistage, Vistage is the world's largest and I believe the oldest CEO membership organization, where there's about a dozen CEOs to 15 people that are in a group, non-competing businesses. They come together once a month for a full day, kind of serve as an unofficial board of advisors for each other. Great organization. I was a member first when I was running a company for someone else. And then the chair that ran the group for me suggested that I should do that. At the time, I was only 42, 3.
Oh, wow.
So I think I was one of, if not the youngest chair that Vistage ever had at that point. Short version, I ended up building 3 groups that I ran for 5 years. And through that process and part of the Vistage process, the members would bring their issues to the table. So whether it was a marketing, sales, production, whatever, financial issue that they had, the group would help solve the problems. So what I took away from that is that probably 90% of the problems that were presented, no matter how they were positioned, turned out they were actually people problems, right? If you had those problems, it's just because you don't have the people who know how to solve those problems. So coming to that realization was part of how I came up with the idea to do what I'm doing now. The other thing that I learned from that experience was watching the successful companies scale. They all had systems and processes for everything that they did, right? That made it repeatable and easy to scale. So I said, okay, so systems and processes, people, right, were the key components. So I started looking around then, I saw, well, what kind of systems were out there? Well, there clearly were sales systems, right, Dean?
Right.
There's marketing systems, there's production systems, et cetera, financial systems. What I didn't find was an end-to-end people system. I found some hiring systems. I found some training systems and stuff, but nothing that actually connected the dots through the entire life cycle of the employee, from hiring to retirement or whatever. So that's where I got the idea. I said, okay, since I couldn't find one, I was going to build a system. And that's what led to us creating the XP3 Talent system. So that's where it came from.
Okay. Dean?
Well, with the Vistage experience, because I remember when we first met, I'm looking at contacts that Mike had here in Atlanta, and I'm like, he knows a lot of the speakers. He knows a lot of the chairs. And that's when I think we had our first conversation about the Vistage, but didn't you speak at one time as well?
Yeah. So actually in I think it was probably 07 when I started to give up my groups and start to build XP3 Talent. I actually started traveling around the world speaking to Vistage groups. So in fact, from 07 to 2010, I had a 3-year stint where I was doing between 7 to 10 Vistage workshop presentations a month.
Wow.
So both in the U.S., Canada, and the United Kingdom.
Wow.
Which was a little wearing on myself, traveling that much. But it was a great experience to be able to meet business owners from all over the world and see, all different types of industries. But again, the commonality that I found is they all had the same problems. Right. Again, it boiled down to people or a lack of the systems to implement through the people.
Well, maybe some good fish fries or pubs in the UK.
Yeah. And one other thing too. So when I was in my chair training, when I was first becoming a chair, one of the speakers that came to our group was a guy that spoke on behavioral science. And that just blew me away. What he brought to the table, which is where the science component of what we do today kind of originated. And I was just enamored by how effective that was. So which also I mentioned in the first book, excuse me, that, when I was talking to a prospective client one time and he goes, well, there's not like there's a science to this. And I said, actually, there is a science to this. So, and that's what kind of really led me down the path to creating this both scientific and analytical hiring process that we put together.
What part of this process led you more naturally towards the construction space? And I know you've been in other verticals as well.
Yeah. And our system will apply to any industry, but, in 2016, I had really, for the first time, fine-tuned what the XP3 Talent system is. And then I reached out to a bunch of my chair colleagues and I said, hey, I just, finalized putting this system together. I want to test it out from the inside out. Right. So I said, who's got some members that are having, people challenges, hiring, training, retaining, that could use my services? Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a year off of my company and go work for them to implement the system to see what kind of results we can create. So one of my members in Maryland introduced me to the CEO of a company called Window Nation. You may have heard of it. Window Nation is I think now the second or third largest residential window contractor in the U.S. At that time, they'd been in business 9 years. We're doing $63 million. So it was two brothers that started it from scratch and built it up to $63 million in 4 locations in 9 years. So what I learned is they were sales and marketing masters. They had the system down to on marketing, how to generate the leads, and they created a 10-step one-call close process. So for example, give me an idea how good they were. The closing industry and the home improvement industry for sales usually hovers between 25 and 30%. Right. Mm-hmm. These guys, as a company average at the time, I think we had about 160 sales reps, had a company closing average of 57%.
Wow.
Yeah. So these guys were experts at this. In fact, they used to say, we're really a sales and marketing company that just happens to sell windows, right? But they said, we could apply this model to any kind of home improvement type of thing. So, or a B2C kind of sale. So anyway, but the problem they had is they had over 80% turnover.
Wow.
Right. So think about that. So in fact, the actual numbers, so I met with these guys in June for the first time, and January to June, they hired about 230 people and turned over 170 of them. All right. So significant problem, which was costing them millions. So that was their problem. They were looking for someone to fix. And I said, yeah, we can fix it. I said, you got to turn over all the people components of the business to me. Let me be in charge of hiring, training, retaining. We're going to implement the XP3 Talent system, train all your managers on how to implement it. And then we'll see what kind of results we can create for you. Well, fast forward 6 months later, we had their 80% turnover down to 23%. But the biggest proof in the pudding, they would put all their salespeople through a 2-week sales boot camp to teach them everything about product knowledge about Windows and how to do this 10-step one-call close. So the most that they'd ever graduated from this boot camp in the prior 9 years was about 50% of a class. Right. Mm-hmm. So using our system, which again, it's not just about the hiring, it's about how do you onboard and how to train effectively. The first class we did, we put 18 people in it and graduated 17 of them. right?
Yeah.
The average exam for the final exam, they had to take a written test to pass the course, to continue on with their employment. The prior, I think they were about maybe 83% as an average. That first class we did, and every class after that, we were averaging in the low 90s, like 92%, 93%. But the real proof in the pudding was week 3 after the 2-week boot camp, they go back to their respective offices and start running sales leads. Well, those 17 reps we graduated sold almost $1.5 million in the first 30 days in the field. And that's when we knew we had something really powerful.
That's amazing.
Wow.
So that kind of led to, and again, I told these guys I was only going to be with them for a year, and then I was going to go back and rebuild my company. So that's what I did. But at that point, they were so impressed, they introduced me to an organization called the Certified Contractors Network, which is a home improvement contractors organization that helps them learn how to sell, market, do production better. Well, they introduced me to the guy that owns that, and he invited me to come speak at his conference. And then that's where the segue into construction happened, because it just then, in fact, they put on 3 or 4 conferences a year, and he had me speak at all of them for the next 2 years.
Wow.
So I just kept getting more contractor businesses. And of course, they would refer me to other contractors. And I kind of resisted putting myself just in one lane like that.
Right.
Until recently, I said, you know what? The last 5 years, 90% of our clients are contractors anyway, and we've developed a real expertise around it. So that's going to be our primary focus, but the model will fit any business.
In terms of the size of the business of the different contractors or trade, I mean, what's the range?
Yeah. So most of them are small companies, in fact, maybe 15 to 25 employees on average. A big home improvement company, isn't even like the Window Nations, which had, at that time, even we were up to like 300 or 400 people when I left. But, if a company's got 50 to 80 employees, that's considered a big contractor.
What would that translate to revenue? I know sometimes employees and revenues don't correlate, but
yeah. So again, if you're on the home improvement side, it's very different than if you're on the commercial side, right? Because you could be a commercial contractor who's got, $20, $30 million projects they're doing, and they may still only have maybe 25 employees, direct employees for themselves. But the home improvement guys, that correlation does work out to about $150,000 an employee annually. So, if they got 25 employees, they're probably doing $5 to $10 million a year.
Okay.
So,
and on the commercial builder side, are you up to $250,000, or where do you think the revenue would be?
Oh, that's what I said. Like we've got some commercial contractors, that are doing 20, 30, 50. We got some doing 50 million, but they still only have maybe 20, 25 direct employees. So they're just dealing in a different market, right? Than a much bigger job.
So after you came back and you had spent the time, you got introduced into the network and the speaking. What length of time was it for you to build out and perfect the program that you eventually took to market?
That is a good question, because by the way, on that note, our core values, one of them is Excelsior, which, by the way, used to be the original name of my company. But I realized from a marketing branding perspective, Jeff, as you can appreciate, was not a good plan, because
no, it was not.
Nobody could spell it. Nobody knew what it was, but it's Latin. It means ever upward or to achieve more. And we were really focused on leadership development in the early days. But from there, I'm sorry, ask me that question again, because I want to make sure I'm answering what you just asked.
When you came back, I mean, what month of time was it?
Fine tuning the model. Yeah.
Correct.
So the point there is we are always improving and learning, but I would say, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we had it probably about 70% where it needed to be. But to where it is today, I would say it's just really been about a year or so. And the key differences and from where we were to now is we would teach a concept, right? And then we would assign them homework and say, okay, here, we taught you how to do this piece. Now you go back and implement it.
Right.
Well, what we found is, once they go back, they get busy in the day to day of running their own business. The follow through just wasn't there.
Right.
So what we've had to do was figure out, how do we do it without assigning homework and make sure. So the model we have today, which is the model that's been highly successful, is we'll teach a topic like it could be on just how to conduct interviews, right? Effectively. So we'll say, hey, watch these. We've created all these, and we're still creating more, but we created all these like 1 to 5 minute video learning modules. Right. So we'll say, watch these 2 or 3 videos. Right. Which might take you 10 or 15 minutes. And then out of the book, I wrote the second version of my book to actually be the workshop manual. So then we'll say, hey, watch these, 2 or 3 videos, read these pages out of the book. And then we do a 90-minute Zoom implementation session where they are in their computer. And by the way, we also created our own talent management software system.
Okay.
Right. So it has all the tools for everything in our system. So we will say, now you guys log in. We're going to show you on our end. But instead of us just showing you and hoping you go do it later, it's like, no, you log in, you do this. Here's where you click. Here's how you do that. By the time we're done with the 90-minute session, they have implemented that module and have it in place. So it's ready to go and to be used. So that model is really just been in the last year. And that's what's driving the success that we're having now.
Well, if I recall, I know on the front end, I know that a lot was virtual, if you will, but I also recall you saying that you went on site for some of the training as well.
Yeah. So the now what we're doing, so the program's called Talent Mastery. And in a 90-day period, what we're going to do is help them implement the talent system. They can learn how to use all the tools. And then after that, it's achieving mastery around getting better and better at it. So with that program, it also took on a component of almost like EOS, if you guys are familiar with that entrepreneurial operating system.
I think I've heard of it before.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
many
but for any of your listeners that may not. But there, what we were doing, it's like, okay, it's more than just, a talent program. Remember, the second part of our mission is achieving operational excellence, right? Mm-hmm. So part of the talent system, the talent management system, the software we built, there's a tool called a company diagnostic. And in there are 5 pillars to every business, right? So it's leadership, the people, sales and marketing, operations, and finance. So in each of those categories, there's about a dozen elements that the leadership team actually rates how well they're doing on a 10-point scale. Mm-hmm. So with that actually ends up telling them where they're doing well and where they need to focus and make improvements. So once a quarter, as part of the Talent Mastery Program, I come out live and facilitate those sessions for them. So it's basically a strategic planning session. We review the previous quarter results, and then we rank the each of those areas and figure out where are the areas they need to focus on to improve over the next quarter, because everything, and that's part of the 3 in our name, XP3. We do everything in 3s, which I'll explain more of that in a little bit if you're interested.
Absolutely.
But it's 3-month cycles, and we set goals, or rocks as EOS might call it, of what we need to focus on to make those improvements in that next 90-day cycle. So that's the on-site service that I provide. And then the other thing we just added too, because even with that, looking at it at 90-day cycles, we found people still aren't doing what they need to do at time. So they needed more accountability. So I don't do them live or on site, but I do live Zoom sessions monthly, and they're purely just an accountability meeting. So, hey, you had your rocks you're working on for this month. Where you at on it? What got done? What do we need to do? Keep it moving forward.
Well, speaking of EOS, if we're going to talk rocks, let's talk scorecards, because And what I really would like to understand, I know you've had some unbelievable, when you've trained, some unbelievable tenure and retention. Yeah. And the one that always has stood out to me was the project manager role, and the significant gap. Length of time that you've been able to increase that tenure. What other roles, and talk to the project manager one, because that one was very impressive, but what other roles?
Oh, well, we help them with any role from the company president, for a division, down to labor, so, and everything in between. So whether it's salespeople, marketing staff, finance staff, it doesn't matter. It's how do you build an effective team, and that's whatever your company happens to need. But the project manager, since we're dealing with contractors, right? And by the way, difference in commercial versus home improvement, residential. Project managers in the residential world are kind of the top tier, or I'm sorry, you're kind of the middle tier. They're the ones out on the job site doing it. Where in commercial, the project manager is managing superintendents who are the ones that are on the job.
Okay, so different roles.
So there's it's different names for the similar type of role. So we had to be able to switch that up. But I was at I told you my client Outback Deck this morning in Woodstock, and they were teaching a class on this, and one of the guys said, "Well, how do we assess a project manager's effectiveness?" Right. And one of the things that's part of our talent system is we built, and this is the first one we built. Now we have them for all roles, but it was a project manager skill assessment. And where that was born out of is we learned years ago that the number one reason that employees aren't as successful as they could be, should be, want to be, managers typically suck at defining success. Right. And that's kind of like asking your people to win a race, but not telling them where the finish line is. So in this assessment tool, we actually put 3 different definitions of success. So the standard, the norm, right? Just what it takes to do a good job and keep your job. Then there's the excellent category. It's like, hey, if you want to advance, get a promotion, get raises, bonuses, whatever, then you got to perform in that category. And then there's the unacceptable behavior, even showing them, hey, this is what bad performance looks like. So this tool actually not only gives the whoever's the manager over those people a better way to pinpoint where their people are doing well and where they need improvement, but it also helps the people have a better career trajectory for themselves, because they can kind of self-manage. They now know what it takes to get from where they are to that next level.
So you're helping develop the leaders and managers and the folks doing the work.
All of them. Yep.
Not that the leaders and managers aren't doing work,
right.
But and I was in that system and so that's why I couldn't be with you and Farrell yesterday. But they had John Ott, who's a large leadership coach, as well as Benj Miller, the prior EOS that's Benj. Okay, and one of the points they drove home to a lot of the business owners was, hey, at the end of the day, I mean, people aren't quitting your company, they're quitting the bad boss.
Yes.
So it seems like you were kind of addressing both ends of those spectrums.
Yeah, obviously, leadership starts from the top, right? Mm-hmm. So, if you want to, our good friend Farrell Middleton, right? He just wrote his book, A environment, A players. You have to create that A environment to attract and retain those A players. But on that note, we have learned that, and this is probably a big mistake that most people make in hiring. Right? Everybody wants that best of the best, the A player. But the reality is there's only 20% of the working population that are natural A players, right? 60% of the population are B players, or what we like to.
I appreciate you recognizing me for that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that was great. And his session yesterday was awesome. So, but anyway, but the 60%, the high potential performers, right? So since that's the bulk of what you're going to probably hire, right? That's why the training and onboarding is so critical, because what you have to do is be able to transform those B players into A players.
Right.
Right. And if you know how to approach it, and that's what our system helps to do, again, whether I don't care if it's a laborer, an installer, or up to the CFO of the company, we still have to teach them how to do your company's methods, systems, processes. And the faster they learn that, the faster they're going to be a productive member of the team. And again, when you pinpoint what success looks like, people's ability to achieve it, in a much shorter time frame goes up tremendously. In fact, actually by about 50%.
Well, when you're dealing with the business owners, I remember we worked pretty hard to build out the sales process.
Right.
And the one thing that you drove home hard and we built in was we have to, whatever we do, get these owners on a discovery call with you and your leaders.
Right.
What made that discovery call stick with them? Because some of the close rates when you had the conversation and talked to some of these points, most companies would dream to have that kind of close rate.
Yeah. So most people don't know the problem that they have, right? They just think, if we could just hire some better people, everything will work out. All right. So, and they don't even understand some of the challenges they have. So part of our discovery process is to help them identify what are the real problems. And excuse me, this is something I actually learned back in Vistage. The problem presented is rarely ever the real problem. Right. So you only learn what the real problem is through a process of discovery questions. So for example, my client Contract Exteriors down in Myrtle Beach, great company. But like most companies, they had challenges with retention. Right. But when I was talking, even their HR leader, who's one of the owners, she thought it was really about just the production is where, the project managers, where they were having their problems. And I guess because that was so significant at the moment. Right. She got the tunnel vision. Oh, that's our problem. But I said, no, let's look at all your retention. So typically what we ask them to do is let's look over a 3-year period, the last 3 years. How many people have you hired? And how many people have left, whether voluntary or were terminated? And then also in what time frame? Were they leaving in the first 90 days, which is where most of them, in fact, we know over 33% of most people leave in that first 90 days, which equates back to you're not hiring properly and you're not onboarding properly, right? So when we looked at that data, she was shocked to find out, it's not just in production with the project managers, it was company-wide. Right. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think we even had some more significant numbers in the sales side than even in the project management side. So them looking at the cost of turnover, right? And most people don't realize because they're hard, they don't track them, succinctly to figure it out. So the Society for Human Resource Managers, SHRM, they estimate, as well as the Department of Labor, usually the cost of turnover is about 33% of a salary. Mm-hmm. Right. And then you can see some studies, it's 100% of it, or 150%, but 33 is probably a realistic. The pieces that, are easy. Well, if you hire a recruiter, right, what you paid them. But what you don't know is how much time you and your managers have spent interviewing, how much time you guys have spent training, and then lost opportunities, right? You hire that new sales guy who doesn't get productive and he's wasting the leads that you're handing him, right? So all of those things are what come into that. So you take the way to figure it out is you figure out, well, how many people have you termed in the last year, whether they quit or you left? What's the average salary among those? And then you take 33% of that number, right? So whatever that ends up being, 15, 20, 30 grand. And then you multiply that by how many people left. And that's your turnover cost. And most companies are shocked when they find out, oh my God, even though we're a 25 employee company, we lost over 300,000 last year on turnover, right? So when you bring that light to the table, right, and then say when you recognize the impact of the damage from that, you start hopefully taking a different outlook on how to go about making sure that doesn't happen again.
Well, once you work through the discovery call, what are those very first steps when you start engaging either remote and or on site?
Working with the client?
Yes.
Yeah. So the first thing we do is that company diagnostic, right? And by the way, you can take a free assessment of that on our website too, just if you want a sense of what that's like. But the company diagnostic helps us to pinpoint where they're actually having their problems. Because remember, it goes through those 5 pillars. So, I would say probably half of our clients that go through that are surprised where they actually have issues. Right. But then every quarter we rank it. So we first start off the first quarter. The first thing we do, we figure out where are the pain points, where do we need to work? And then every quarter we repeat that. And with all of these clients we're working with now, in the first 90 days, they're seeing anywhere between 10 to 50% improvements, in that first 90 days, and either getting better at hiring, getting better at onboarding, getting better at sales, conversion, closing rates, better at production and getting the production people, productive a lot faster than they typically were. So that's where we start, and that's how we continue to see the progress.
Well, I know that I spent a lot of time initially, you had me go through that myself, but there's also a lot of other great tools that make it easy to navigate on your website, which I was very surprised for a company like yours. It's like, wow, you would think you were dealing with a website with someone from a Fortune 100.
Right.
Matter of fact, better.
Thank you.
Because you could actually navigate and it was useful.
Yeah. Yeah. We tried to make it as user-friendly as possible.
Yeah. So that part's good. So at what point did this transform to your first book? Because I remember our conversation, I think, you're kind of like, I think Dean has maybe falling and hitting his head on a rock because I said, "Hey, would you mind sending me a book?" And you're like, "Sure." I'm like, "Well, would you autograph it?" And you're like, "What?" And it was like, I did promise him that I would read it and I wouldn't sell it. Because with his autograph, I mean, and the legend going back to Italy, I mean, it'd probably be worth a lot of money.
Oh yeah, I'm sure at least $5 or $10.
Yeah. So at what point did you do the first book then?
Oh, well, I did that book that you're holding there. That came out in 2019. So, and it's the second version is a more streamlined version. So, because again, the system wasn't really fine tuned like it is now. So this new version that's just coming out in the next week or so, is actually more of a workbook for the Talent Mastery Program.
Okay.
So it's much more succinct. It's very instructional. So it tells you exactly how to implement. And that's a problem I always had reading other books. Like everybody knows about Good to Great, right? Collins' book. So great book. But Collins didn't really tell you how to do a lot of the stuff. He just said, get the right people on the bus in the right seats, get the wrong people off. Well, good concept, but how do you go about doing that? And most people don't effectively understand how to do it. So what we do is actually give you the step-by-step process on how to go about doing it. And then we give you the tools through our talent management platform to do that.
Well, I know the first book was an easy read because I could read it in one sitting, which with my attention deficit, I mean, it was probably a good thing.
Yeah.
But so this one, is it more to where you should take different parts of the book as you go through it? Since it is a lot more instructional.
Yeah. And I mean, you could read cover to cover, but we designed it to be the work manual for the Talent Mastery Program. So we'll tell you, hey, read these pages or read this chapter in preparation of this workshop. Right. So yeah, it's as simple as that book was. This one's condensed even for, we took out all the fluff and just put the key things that you need to know and apply in order to achieve the results.
Well, and I know we've talked about this a lot, and I know our friends in the EOS will appreciate it. I mean, my understanding is you operate off of EOS yourself as a company, and you have pretty much from day one.
Yeah. Self-implementing.
Self-implemented. Yes. Okay. But we also know that in that commercial and really high-end residential building, it's approximately 35% do operate on the EOS. And I know you spent some time to try to target, because clearly the people part of traction and how you've implemented what you're doing with hire, train, and retain, that has to be meaningful and hit the mark with a lot of those companies, I would think, out of the gate.
Yeah, it ties in. And like probably at least half of my clients are in EOS, whether they're self-implementing or have a professional implementer. But as some of the professional implementers that have looked at our system have said, our system is kind of EOS on steroids because it gets much more granular. So for example, in the EOS model, right, your company's in the center and then you got the cogs around it, and people is one of those. So our approach is just a little different. Our thought process is, no, your people are in the center. Without your people, you don't have a company, right? And then everything else goes around the people. So just a slight variation to it, but the same basic principles. But like our company diagnostic just takes it to a more granular level to really pinpoint where they're doing well and where they need to focus.
Now, I could see that heading home in a big way. And as you know, my own business plan's on the VTO. And when you read through Traction and you think you have your VTO nailed, then Gino Wickman just kind of honed in and asked you to pull back. And I eventually got what I thought was close to a good plan. And then my good friend who Joe Carr, EOS implementer here in North Fulton, Forsyth, around Atlanta, he then helped me further, and it was like having Gino Wickman sitting there. So, as you know, I can't even say my name in less than 2 or 3 minutes. So, but don't laugh too much. So, at what point did you think of building the second book?
Probably about 2 years ago, when we were creating workshop manuals for the mastery program. which was time consuming and tedious. And then every time we improve something, we'd have to change it. And so that's when I said, wait, and we created new approaches, better approaches, simplified things a lot, as I said. So I said, okay, I need to update the book. And that's where I got the idea for the second edition. But as I was writing it, then I said, you know what? I can actually, if I write this in the right format, this can replace those workshop manuals. So make it, again, everything we try to do is in a simplistic form. So good segue back around to the 3 in our name, XP3. Right. So the X actually represents Excelsior, but not spelled that way, right? The P, if you can guess what the P is for.
People.
And the 3 is actually the science. So I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there's science behind the number 3.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So the simplistic version is, the most that most of us human beings, as normal folks, can learn and retain and apply are 3 things at a time. Right. That's why every marketing is done in 3. Read these top 3 things, right? Do these 3 things. And if you look around, what was it?
Frameworks as well.
Yeah. Frameworks.
And the top 3 you just did 3 as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So we do everything in 3s to keep it simple and easy. So like when before I understood this concept behind the magic of 3, I might have like 5 or 6 objectives to something. And I said, no, 3 objectives is the max we're going to work on. Even with our company diagnostic, we might identify that you got 10 different things you need to work on. 3 at a time. So then we prioritize. What are the top 3 low-hanging fruit that's going to make the most impact in the next 90 days? So everything's done around that 3.
Sounds like the same reason you had 3 chairs when you're in Vistage, right?
Yeah. But didn't do it on purpose, but yeah.
90 days is 3 months. So you're continuing your 3s.
Yeah. And by the way, so the other stuff, the Father, Son, Holy Ghost,
that's
the
right.
Olympics have, gold, silver, and bronze. In geometry, the most stable shape, triangle, right? So that's why the XP3 Talent System logo is a triangle because of that.
Right.
So,
all right, I got a question for you.
Sure.
I'm going to interrupt. Dean's had too many questions. All right. So this has nothing to do with 3, but I have to ask it anyways. So I'm a big fan of company culture, and you talk about culture, yes. And your company has a culture, whether you know it or not. It's really just actually defining that culture.
Correct.
How do you fix that? How do you generate the proper company culture based off of your framework?
Yep. Good question. So it's actually simpler than most people think, but it's centered around your mission, your vision, and your values. And most companies don't even have them, right? Or they have some very convoluted
kind of like no sales process, right?
Yeah. Right. So the first thing we start looking at it is, what is your mission statement? What is your vision? What are your core values? If you don't have them, that's one of the other things we start. We're going to help you create them,
right?
Or we're going to refine what you have to make sure that they're effective, right? They have to be short. They have to be concise so that every employee in the company, can memorize them and recite them from memory. But most companies that, if they do have them, they're very long and convoluted. Even I find most, the CEO doesn't even know, what they're, or can't recite it from memory the way it was written. So it's got to be simple. And that your mission, vision, and values kind of define your culture. And the test of effectiveness is your mission should actually inspire your people to take action. So if it's not written in a manner that does that, it needs work, right? Your vision should ignite their passion. It should get them excited about what's possible, not just for the company, but for them as well. That's part of that. And then your core values should drive behavior, right? So, and it's not just enough, even if they are written well, it's not enough to just have them up on a wall somewhere. You have to be constantly communicating those and incorporating them into every aspect of everything you do. Like we say, you should start every company meeting right, going through and reviewing what your mission, vision, and values are. Every decision, I know at our company and our clients, what we teach them is every decision you're going to make, run them past your core values, right? So like most companies have integrity nowadays as one of them. So are you really living integrity in every decision that you actually make? So when you're about to make a decision, right, you run it past the integrity microscope. And also, how integrity is defined for your company could be different than your company, right? So that sub definition is equally as important as what that single word is as well. But that formation is what really creates a culture. And then you build out everything around that. The people you hire have to be in alignment with your core values. And what we teach is if they don't get excited by your vision, right? And if they can't act on your mission, right? Then those are bad hires. You need, and it's a two-way street. That's another problem people have too, is hiring's usually done all one-sided. What do we need? All right. But you have to realize in today's world, employees have a lot of choices. So if you're going to hire effectively, you have to realize that they are hopefully trying to make as good of a decision about whether your culture is a good fit for them, or whether they're going to enjoy working at your company, and is there a future for them there as well?
Yeah.
That's a very different approach you need to take to how you do it.
Well, I had to just question, because what I'm seeing consistently with a lot of companies is the 5 different generations right now. And you got the alphas coming that are going to be the most technologically savvy group that we've had. So when I look at cultures, I think companies are struggling to adapt their culture to make sure it's applying to all the different generations.
Yeah.
So with XP3, is this approach going to help address that as well?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And there's not a one size fits all, right? You need to be flexible in today's world.
Yeah.
So, whether that's hybrid work or full in office, you still have to have some flexibility. So like even like on that subject alone, right, is very big today. Is it hybrid? Is it in office? Even if it's in the office, that's fine if you need to do it, but you still need to be flexible. So like, if you got young kids that you need to get off to school in the morning, you can't start work till 8:30, 9 o'clock, then be flexible with that, right? And then maybe make it up on the back end. So same thing. If you need to get off early, you're saying your son likes playing baseball, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you got to be at a baseball game at 3 o'clock. Give your employee the chance to go do that, because if you value their family and support them in that as much as they want you to, they're going to be much more loyal to you and your company and stick around and produce a lot better for you.
So a lot of construction companies, especially the old school construction companies, they do not care about culture. I'm assuming at all.
A lot of them don't.
Exactly.
They don't, and it's because they don't understand the importance of it.
Correct.
It's the old school. Hey, you get a paycheck. What else do you need? Right.
Yes, I grew up with that for sure. Definitely. I mean, culture. What is culture?
Yeah.
So, but again, and to what Dean said, these next generations are very much into culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you explain to the stubborn construction business owner that they need culture, like, and why? Like, truly, why?
Yeah.
I mean, it does increase their bottom line, and that's because you get to actually retain these clients or these employees, right?
Yep. Yeah. So again, we kind of start on the discovery process. Are you achieving your sales, your production goals, your profitability goals? Right. If you're not, then we diagnose why not. Is it a turnover problem? And usually with that mentality, it's almost always there. Right. But they just are willing to keep throwing money at it, to hire more people. That's why some recruiters are getting, 20-30% of an annual salary. And in the commercial world, right, they pay a lot higher than the residential side. Like a commercial project manager is probably making on average $140,000, $160,000 a year. Right. So you're paying a recruiter 20-30% to fill that role.
Wow.
Right.
I'm in the wrong business, Dean.
Yeah. But I also say you don't need to pay that kind of money if you learn how to hire properly. Right. Yeah. But that also means you got to be willing to invest the time. And a lot of those guys aren't willing to invest the time. So it's kind of, and you could probably speak to this more, Danny, about identifying their pain point. So, and that's why we look at, are you achieving your profitability goals? Are you having the freedom as an entrepreneur that you wanted to? So what I've learned is that most entrepreneurs actually build themselves a job, not a company. They're working more hours, right? Even if they're making more money, they can't enjoy it because they're working 60, 70 hours a week. So it's really about, and that's part of our system, it's achieving owner independence. But that should also be for every employee, right? That goes back to that flexibility. You need to give them that independence, but you can't manage around a clock. you have to manage based on results and performance. So, which goes back to what I said, most managers are really bad at defining success. But if you define success and manage to the key results, then who cares if it takes them 10 hours or 60 hours, right?
Right.
That's up to them.
Well, imagine how little they'd have to pay in recruiting if they had someone that could help them train and retain their employees, right?
Could imagine. Yeah.
Now, speaking of that, I mean, I think you spent some time with our dear friend Farrell Middleton yesterday.
Yes.
I'm just curious, how did that go? And,
That was great. I mean, Farrell, so I just got done. Well, I haven't finished it. I'm about 70% through his book, which was great foundational concepts on creating an A environment, the culture, same thing. And anybody that writes or speaks on this topic, everybody is in sync today of that foundational culture, what it takes to build that culture. And Farrell does that very well. And then that culture will help you to attract and hire and retain those top performers that you want and need in order to scale your company. So what I was really impressed with, though, was his facilitation skill set. We had I think it was about 5 different companies represented, the owners that were in. Well, actually, I think there were 3 owners and then 2 senior level guys that were in there, all contractors. But the engagement and the discussions that they were having, and amazingly, and one example to your question, Joe, one of the guys in the room has a concrete business that he's second generation. Dad started it back in the early 80s. He took it over, I think maybe 12 years ago, I think he said. But same thing, like they don't have a real culture, a defined culture. They don't have a mission statement. They don't have a vision statement, right? But they're still doing okay despite that. But is that all you're striving for, is okay? Right? Or do you really want to escalate that and take it to a new level? And this guy wasn't just enamored by what Farrell was talking about and but the potential he could, from where he is to where he could get to by focusing on that intentional culture.
Okay.
So. Well, I know we're going to be spending a lot of time as you go back to market the new book. I know it ties in with a lot of efforts you're going to be doing to go to market. And I'm really excited with what we've done so far, but we just still need to perfect with the brain, with the knowledge net. And I love the fact of the synergy you're going to be tying towards those companies operating on EOS, because clearly what you're doing to hire, train, and retain is going to resonate there significantly.
Yep.
I also think that what you've been able to do, knowing, we talked about pain earlier, and clearly we know that the pain of those critical roles like pre-construction manager, project manager, superintendent, supervisor, any of the architect, engineer, or other critical leadership or revenue bearing roles. I mean, clearly, I know the part of trying to identify those folks that are struggling with finding those right people.
Yep.
I mean, I think that's going to be something that really is going to help XP3. Are there other things that with the networking that you're doing that's going to help you try to touch those companies? Because if they understood what XP3 does, I think you're going to have some good conversations.
Right.
A lot of times it's tough to find those clients. And I know KnowledgeNet and what you're doing there, investing, that's going to help. But that's not the only thing we need to be doing, I think, to really grow XP3.
Well, this is helpful. So thank you guys.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad.
Actually, I want to go back, if we can, to the question you asked about the culture. Too, because this is kind of where the science piece comes in that we haven't talked about yet. That's a critical piece to the puzzle. And it's around employee engagement, which most people don't even really understand what that really is. Right. They've maybe read something on it. They heard someone speak about it, but they still don't understand it, including I've even found people who are speaking on it who don't really understand where it comes from. Right. And that goes back to the behavioral science or the psychology of the approach. So employee engagement is a psychological connection to the organization. Right. And then to the work that they're doing, their actual job. So And if you want to get your employees really jazzed up, and it starts in the hiring process, right? Where I said they've got to be excited about your mission and passionate about helping you or your vision to accomplish that and be able to take action on the mission. Well, to accomplish that, you have to create that psychological connection. And there's different methods and approaches for going about it. But I'll give you a classic example with the owner of the company, right? So let's assume you have a mission, a vision, and core values, right?
Right.
So we'll start with that premise. Well, if it's your company, right, they're your mission. It's your vision. It's your core values. So you are already psychologically connected, meaning you are willing to do whatever it takes to achieve that vision, right? To live out your mission. And hopefully you are making decisions based on those core values you created.
Right.
Well, go back to when I was a Vistage Chair. One of the topics would always come up, how do I get my employees to be as motivated as me? And back then I didn't understand it like I do today. And I always say, well, maybe give them a piece of the company. If they own it, they'll be as committed. But I learned they don't have to own it to have that same commitment. You can create that same psychological connection. Mm-hmm. And that's what I said. So when you're hiring, you need to have your mission, your vision, at least your mission and your core values in your job post, right? Mm-hmm. They need to be on your website, on your career page, on your About Us page. So in other words, they got to be visible everywhere. And you need to ask interview questions around it to find out if people are really inspired by those things and connected. If they're not, don't hire them. It'll be short term, right? But if they are, then that leads to what's known as discretionary effort. So the Gallup organization, if you're familiar with Gallup, does all the polls, mm-hmm. right? Gallup's are the leaders in the research around employee engagement, what a lot of our work is based on. And they actually discovered they do a state of the workplace survey every couple of years. In fact, they just got an email the other day. They just come out with the latest one. But usually they interview or survey about 50,000 companies around the world, all different types of companies, sizes, and it's all about engagement, trying to figure out where the engagement levels are. But one of the things they discovered is the average employee only puts in between 40 to 60% of their effort that they can, right? Which means they have the choice of whether or not they are going to put in that other 40 to 60% effort. Mm-hmm. Where an owner who's psychologically connected to their own organization, they'll put in 120% effort, right? So that's the key, is how do we tap in to that discretionary effort? And the way you do it is you make sure they're psychologically connected to your mission, vision, and values. And then on the role, right? The way the science works there is you have to figure out what are the behavioral requirements, which are different than the skill set, right? What are the behavioral requirements to be successful in a particular role? So we'll use the project manager as an example, right? They've got to be incredibly detailed oriented, right? Because that's what that job's all about. Now you can learn to be detailed oriented, but that doesn't mean you enjoy doing those details, right? And I'm a classic example of that. I can do the details as good as anybody around the things in my company that I need to do. And I'm okay with it for about an hour. But if you tell me, hey, you got to spend 4 hours today crunching these numbers and diving into these details, can I do it? Sure. And if you interviewed me for a job doing it, I can convince you I'm an expert at those details. But you're missing a critical piece if you don't find out if I enjoy doing those things. Because the enjoyment piece, along with the know-how, is what gets you that consistent productivity. So what we do as part of our system is we identify for whatever role we're hiring, a salesperson, a project manager, or an accountant, whatever. We find out what are the behavioral attributes that are required to be successful in that role. Then we have the employee take a 10-minute personality assessment. We use a tool called the MPO. And then they have a tool in there called Right Match that will match the target behavioral profile to the personality traits, which is how an employee or a person is wired to think, feel, and behave. And it overlaps them, and you can figure out exactly where the fits and gaps are. You can also figure out how big the gaps are. Just a little gap with a little coaching, mentoring we could close, or it's a huge gap. Like for me, like I said, with the details, I can do it, but I can only do it effectively for about an hour or two at a sprint. All right. Otherwise, my impatience kicks in, my boredom kicks in, my high level of trust kicks in. I go, close is good enough. Right. And that's where I usually make my mistakes. But if you can find out that somebody not only has the knowledge and skill how to do it, but they have that behavioral fit, that's where you get a consistently productive, and highly productive employee. So through the hiring process, we do that to make sure that they want to do the work, not just that they can.
Hey, you were always pretty quick to, when we weren't getting the number of discovery calls you needed, you were pretty quick to spend time in the scorecards.
Yep.
You had no problem doing that.
Yeah, like I said, I can do the details. I just don't enjoy doing them for long periods of time. So, could I be a project manager? Yeah. But would I be a consistently good one? Probably not.
So you say in the book, you're just talking about it, that most employees are at a 40 to 60% engagement capacity.
Yep.
How in the world does knowing your mission, your vision, your values increase that? Like give me some tangible examples, because I've always been told that no one's ever going to be as engaged in your company as the owner is, period.
Yep.
So how far can these people go from a percentage once you work your system through there? It's hard for me to see how that would increase somebody's engagement.
Right. So great question, Jeff. So the Gallup study, for example, they have shown and proved through their research that you could double the productivity of your organization by just tapping in with the existing employees you have, without adding one single more employee, by just tapping into that discretionary effort with the people you have. And that's, again, it's about igniting their passion around your vision, right? And getting them to take action around your mission, because they believe in that mission as much as the owner does, and they live and breathe those core values. And as I said, when we're hiring, if people aren't in alignment with our core values or our clients' core values, we won't hire them. I don't care how good of a skill set you have, because I know it'll be short term.
Can you get that discretionary from people that you've hired poorly before running through your system? Or
for some people,
I mean, chicken before the egg.
Yeah. And that's part of, building high performing teams. It isn't just about hiring. It starts with the people you have, right? Cause that's the low hanging fruit. But some people you may not be able to achieve it first in the role they're in. That may just be, you think I got a bad employee. No, maybe it's just not a good fit for where you have them. And by understanding how they're psychologically wired through this assessment, we can figure out where maybe a better role might be. I've actually taken people out of accounting and put them into sales, Dean, because they were built better for that.
Wow.
And they were shocked because they didn't think that would be something that they would really love to do. Right. Yesterday, one of the guys at the session I was at Outback Deck, this company, out of, where are they? Chicago. No, Chicago. They're out of Chicago. This guy, so the owner of the company's there. He introduced me to this guy. So, by the way, it's my nephew, right? He says he was an emergency room nurse. And then, decided he really didn't like it. He says, well, why don't you come work for me? And he goes, well, what would I do? And he goes, well, so they ran a personality profile and they said, how about sales? And he goes, well, I like talking to people and stuff, and so anyway, this guy's only been doing it for, I think he said maybe 8 months now. And I'll give you an example that, a good home improvement sales guy does about 100,000 a month in sales. This guy just did 330,000 last month.
No, what you're saying is on the mark, because with so many clients, when I'm coming in building out the sales process, because normally it doesn't exist, they're normally saying, hey, I've got some personnel issues. And I'm like, hold on, we got to hold off on that, because do we know we have the right tools in place, the right process, and have we trained them to give them a fair opportunity? And there's one client I actually turned down working with because they really looked at me like coming in to help them eliminate a couple of the people without giving them a chance. But to your point, it is amazing when you do the basics and you get them engaged. And what we try to do is actually include them. And it doesn't always work, but we try to include them in helping build it out, because all of a sudden you have the ownership. Because as we all know, if you don't have that balance of what's right for the employee, but also the predictable results for the owner and the business, at some point it's not going to work. So, I mean, it sounds like, with that personality, because that's quite a switch from a nurse to a sales professional.
Right. Yeah. Very different.
But if they were in the wrong role initially and they weren't having fun.
Right. Well, and that's kind of the example I said. What happened, they ignited that guy's passion on what he's passionate about doing. So that's that psychological connection to the actual behavioral components of the job. All right. And then it was a matter of teaching him, the sales process. Here's how you do it. All right. So the guy was smart. Obviously, he was smart enough to become an emergency room nurse. He's smart enough to learn how to sell and follow a proven process and system that they taught him. So that combination of skill and passion is what is achieving that results. And I think they said he's like outdoing most of their other sales reps that have been with him for years.
Can you name that personality test again for the viewership?
Yeah, the one we use is called the MPO. It's by a company called Ingenio out of Montreal, Canada. It's only been around about, I think, around 15 or 16 years now. There are other assessment tools out there that are good. What makes this one stand out is it's not just a basic assessment tool. It's a whole suite of tools. So, example, I mentioned that right match, how you first get the target behaviors, then you compare it to the individual's personality. But a 10-minute assessment gives you your personality profile report. It gives your communication style, which we use a lot in our coaching, how to interact and communicate more effectively. It produces another report called a talent report, where it assesses 46 behavioral competencies and figures out where your strengths are to where maybe things that aren't such a strength for you. And by doing that, helps us to pinpoint out of the 46 where you would be best. Are you best in, doing something like accounting, or are you going to be better selling or being a project manager? So it's an awesome tool. And the good news, every year they keep coming out. So of course with AI, right? So their latest advancement they just launched in January was an AI component. So some of the things it'll do, for example, like let's say the two of you work together, right? And you're having challenges getting along. So what's shocking,
I don't like his, I don't have a beard, nor do I like this, but
you can ask the AI question. So what does Jeff have to do to adjust his communication, to be more effective in communicating with Dean based on Dean's communication style? And it'll analyze the thing for you and spit it out. So here's how you adjust, do this, and you will be more effective. Because on using that concept, right? What is effective communication?
Yeah.
Well, at a base level, at a scientific core level, we base effective communication on the way we do it. Right? It's got us this far in life, must be okay. So in our minds, I'm a good communicator, right? But we know, hopefully you've learned that the only person's opinion that counts is the person you're talking to.
Right.
If they think you're being effective, you're effective. If not, then you're not. And what we try to do is change that person. You need to change Dane to be like me. But what this concept is, you only need to adjust when you're talking to me, and I need to adjust for you.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
okay.
So this has been awesome having you here.
Well, thank you.
And books coming out in several weeks.
Yep.
I know you've got a game plan, and I'm excited to work with you around that. Go to market.
Yep.
Anything that when you think about it, because I know it's exciting, I know it's tied together. Are you doing any other grand plans in terms of this launch, or?
Other than just promoting it and doing speaking gigs around it, nothing at this point, but I'm open to suggestions if you got them.
I think we'll have some. You might like them, or you might think they're dumb ideas, but I think when I look at what you're doing, it's the most laser focused I've seen in a long time. And it's great to see every step you're doing around the commercial and maybe some of the high-end residential or other residential as well. But I think with the book and where it's laid out, the strategy, I really like some of the networking that you're doing with others in the field, like with Farrell, like with the 5-6 customers in Woodstock today. I think all of that's going to tie together very nicely.
Yeah, well, I will say this, that I'm very proud of and humbled by. As I mentioned to you earlier, a gentleman named Brian Gottlieb, who I met last year he was speaking at the conference. Brian just sold his company for $150 million last year. He wrote a book called Beyond the Hammer, which is an awesome book. It's along the style, if you've read any of Patrick Lencioni's books, they're, like the 5 dysfunctions of a team that are fable story format.
Right.
So Brian writes in that style. But he had his company, he had over 600 employees, I think like 4 or 5 states. So he built a very successful home improvement contracting business. Anyway, I met Brian and I asked him, I said, would you be willing to read my manuscript and maybe write a testimonial or something? So he actually read it. He goes, I'll write the forward for you. More than a testimonial.
Wow.
And I was so humbled by what he put, but he said, had I had this book, when I was trying to figure it out, he said, I could have saved 5 years and $500,000 in expenses in trying to create the system that we had. He goes, but your system basically has taken that to a whole nother level. So, so I'm hoping that, endorsements from people like him and yourselves that will help get the word out there.
It sounds like with all the efforts we're going to be doing, we need to find a lot of those Brians.
Yes.
5 years ahead of time.
Yeah, that's right.
Sounds
right.
like XP3 is going to be doing some standing tucks. So
hopefully, like I said, my vision is to create a world where employees and companies can thrive. And I believe that the XP3 Talent system will be the next EOS out there with the focus on people, because like I said, and I'll quote Brian, the ceiling of your business is determined by the capabilities of your people. Right? You're only as good as what those people can produce. So if you focus more on your people and enhance their capabilities, then it's limitless what your company can accomplish.
Well, something tells me with the focus, the enthusiasm, and pardon the pun, it looks like you're going to have a lot of traction with the remarketing. And
thank you, Dean.
So look forward to it.
All right.
Michael Matalone, where can people find you?
You can email me at mike@xp3talent.com, and that's the number 3. Right. You can go to our website, xp3talent.com, take that free company diagnostic as a starting point, or sign up for one of our free company diagnostics that we'll do for you as well. That's
When's the book coming out?
It should be in the next couple of weeks. I actually just got the email from the publisher today saying the final edits are now completed. So I just got to go in and review them. Mm-hmm. So assuming there's not a lot of things I got to fix, it should be 2-3 weeks at the tops.
Awesome. And we'll look forward to our autograph version. And again, we will read it. We won't sell it. Unless the price is too good.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We're in an inflationary period.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it will be available on Amazon for the launch. But then we're going to pull it off Amazon and have it just be distributed through my publisher after that, or right through our websites where people will be able to order it. Both. Okay. You'll get the link directly to Amazon through our website, but then after that, it'll link directly to the publisher's house. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the Business Growth Playbook.
Thank you, guys.
And for those that need serious sales help, please reach out to Dean Nolly.
Yes, Dean has been fantastic in helping us with ours.
So I appreciate you saying that. And I've got to go around the horn with Jeff, what he's done with these podcasts and what he's done for, you, myself, and so many others. I mean, his services and how he handholds us to help us do better. And thank God he does, because I know I need it. So, Jeff Evans, how do people find you, Jeff?
You can go to jvincentcreative.com or reach me at jeff@jvincentcreative.com.
Awesome.
We find you where, Dean?
You can find me at salesgrowthimagination.com.
All right.
And if that's too much work, just call the cell at 404-307-1841.
All right.
You're about to get 3,000 robocalls in the next 2 days. All right. Till next time, thank you so much for watching, listening. And until our next episode, stay safe. God bless.
Thank you. God bless.
Bless.